Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is another collection video. Last time I did one on my Star Wars novels, and I wanted to do another one, and this time around my collection of Cinefex magazines. Now this is a very, I wouldn't necessarily say obscure, but definitely a niche thing. But I really don't feel that these magazines should be anywhere near as overlooked as they are. If you are a fan of visual, practical effects, makeup effects, special makeup effects, um, anything involving special effects and the behind the scenes of films, Cinefex is an invaluable resource for behind the scenes information, photos, interviews with the crew members, and just an absolutely wonderful collection of very in-depth behind the scenes info about a multitude of films. If you are a big fan of 80s movies or 90s films, majority of the big blockbuster iconic films are featured in Cinefex and are broken down effect by effect in every minute detail. It is such a wonderful series of magazines that I can't recommend highly enough. I really cannot wait to have all of the Cinefex magazines that I want to have in my collection. Eventually, I want to get all of the Cinefex from the 80s to the probably around the mid 90s, and then I'll probably cut it off because honestly, I'm more interested in the effects that were in films around that time period because it was a lot more practical. So I'm more interested in how they did the miniatures and the model work and the makeup effects and stuff like that, and not so much as interested in CGI or visual effects. It's just not really that interesting to me. I'm sure it's probably equally as impressive in some ways, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the people who do that for a living, or from people who really like and find visual effects with CGI fascinating. But for me, it's just the practical stuff is just so much more intriguing to read about and to learn about. And enough of me basically doing a promo for Cinefex. Let's check out my collection. So the first issue I have here is number 5. I actually got this at a garage sale near me. I went to a garage sale and there really wasn't much there, but then I looked in a box and I saw this, and it was amongst a bunch of other crap and that I couldn't care less about, and I got this for like $1, so it was a great deal. This is a magazine that's like older than me, so and forgive the autofocus. I just turned off the autofocus, so you won't have to worry about the camera moving in and out. But yeah, this is a really great find. It even has the Cinefex uh, ad inside the magazine. So this one talks about Ray Harryhausen, Clash of the Titans, little interview section about Roy Arbogast, and it also talks about Caveman. So there's just so many wonderful things. Like if you are a fan of Ray Harryhausen, this is a really good issue to have because it talks about the different stop motion effects and a lot of Ray Harryhausen's films. And then here's Clash of the Titans, because this is from 1981. It's older than I am. That's how old this magazine is, and it's in really good shape for something that old, and for something just being in a box of just junk. So I mean, yeah, I can't get enough of this stuff. I've always been a fan of this kind of stuff, of behind the scenes, about the making of movies. So yeah, Roy Arbogast. This is the section about him. He did worked on effects for Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Dracula, The Incredible Shrinking Woman, Caveman, Escape from New York, So here's a cool picture of Jaws. Like some of these are just some really really cool set photos and behind the scenes info, and just I'm just really really enthusiastic about Cinefex. Um, I never really had heard of Cinefex until I found some randomly at a Goodwill in downtown Portland, Oregon, and I got a few of them then, and I instantly fell in love. I was like, "There's a magazine that goes in depth on the behind the scenes of movies." Yes, sign me up for that. So that's issue number 5. This is issue number 10. This is one I've been wanting to get for a while, and I finally got it. I got it off eBay for a really good price. This one talks about Poltergeist, um, and it also talks about Firefox, but I didn't really get it for Firefox. I got it for Poltergeist because this is the closest that any Poltergeist fan is ever going to get to getting a in-depth look at the behind the scenes of the making of the movie. Like, this goes super in-depth on everything, from the various different effects that were done in the film. It's such a wonderful read as a fan of the film, and this is all the kind of stuff that Steven Spielberg, the schmuck, doesn't want you to know about apparently, but sadly, the only way to really see how they did all these wonderful effects is to get your hands on this vintage Cinefex magazine or some scans online. You would think there'd be more scans, but there really isn't that many. There was some interesting stuff like this. I don't remember that ghost or that image ever being in the movie, so that might have been something from a deleted scene. Yeah, it was an earlier concept for the Beast that was sculpted by Craig Reardon. So that's a pretty cool sight to see. Eventually, they went with this design of the Beast, and you see some really cool. They show you how they did the effects in the water tank. You got the sculpt there. This is just. I mean, it's so cool. Apparently, my cat thinks it's cool too because he decides to make a bunch of noise. So then. Yeah. Forgive my cat. It's late. He's antsy. So this talks about Firefox. To be honest, the best thing about Firefox with Clint Eastwood, and really the only really good thing about it, is the effects and Clint Eastwood. So I could really care less about everything else. But and the effects are kind of interesting to read. Stop it. I'm getting too excited right now. Not a fan of. Cut it out. But yeah, this is issue number 10. Stop. Olympus. Stop it. There he goes. There he goes. He's laying down. Good boy. Then we have issue number 26, which is all about Poltergeist 2. This is one of the first issues I ever got. It still has the Goodwill sticker on it for $2.99. I wish I could go back in time and have more cash on me, because when I got these, there was a whole bunch of Cinefex there for like $2.99. Just really good prices, really cheap, and I just wish I wish I had more money then. But I was only able to afford to get these two. I actually think my dad got them for me, if I remember correctly. But yeah, this one talks about Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. So that's a really cool piece of artwork by H.R. Giger. So yeah, this is another great resource for the making of Poltergeist 2. Poltergeist 2 has a special edition from Screen Factories, unlike the first film. So there are some nice behind-the-scenes information and interviews and stuff like that. But even in those interviews, this still reveals more in depth on how they did effects than some of those interviews do. So yeah, it's really really cool. And yeah, there's the the Carol Ann sequence where near the end when her face gets all demonic and everything. Um, I kind of wanted to show this shot because this shot right here with the clouds and everything, as you can see, it's a darker blue tint. Um, I know people have been pointing out that Scream Factory's recent remaster of the film had like the incorrect lighting, color grading, but it's actually closer. This is what it actually looks like. It's supposed to look like anyway. So that's actually closer to what it originally looked like on film when it came out in theaters. This one, this issue also talks about young Sherlock Holmes, which is a fun movie. I would like to re-review that because when I reviewed it, it was after my car accident, so it was just an audio only one. Here's an ad for making Ghostbusters. This is a fantastic book, but it's rare as hell. It's one of the rarest books that I own. But it's worth it. One of these days, I'd like to do a video just showing making Ghostbusters, or just my making of books, because I have a lot of making of books, because I love it. I just love looking at the behind the scenes process of filmmaking, especially with special effects. So this is issue number 26, about Poltergeist 2, and a few other films. There's definitely, I still have some more to show you guys. This is issue number 31. This one talks about Spaceballs. So it talks about Spaceballs, The Witches of Eastwick, as well as Masters of the Universe. I got this because I'm a huge fan of Spaceballs. I was ever since I was a kid. I mean, that's a big reason why I got it, because I'm a huge, ginormous fan of this film, and I also it also talks about Masters of the Universe, which I was a fan of as well at the time. Here they are working on, I think it's Mega Made. And, yeah, this is a lot of fun. I'd love to just sit down and just reread all of these again, because they're just really informative and in-depth, and really entertaining to read, especially if you are into this kind of stuff. This is the closest you ever get to getting any kind of in-depth making of Master Universe, a 1987 film. So yeah, it talks about, the different makeup effects, different visual effects and stuff they did for the film. The miniature throne float, which I always thought looked pretty cool. They talk about how they did that. Yeah, it was they did it with miniatures and with a life-size prop. As you can see, like there's a black and white shot of the miniature that they used. So yeah, that's issue number 31. Then we have issue number 32, which is, of course, I wanted to have this because it's got Robocop. It talks about Robocop. But the other reason I really wanted to get this, and I got this off eBay for a good price, was because it talks about Innerspace. And Innerspace is one of my all-time favorite films. It's right up there with Robocop and a bunch of others. And it won an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, but it never... There was a commentary track that apparently talked about a lot of the effects, but I haven't listened to it yet. But there was never any behind-the-scenes footage or anything like that. There's no featurettes, no anything like that. So this was the closest... Well, honestly, it was the only way to see how they did those really impressive special effects for Innerspace. And, the cool bonus, it talks about Robocop. So, I mean, as one of the biggest Robocop fans out there, this is definitely worth adding to the collection. But the thing, Robocop, unlike Innerspace, has like a ton of behind the scenes stuff already. There's behind the scenes footage. There's in-depth documentaries. There's Robodoc coming out, which I'll talk about more about that later. There's something going on with Robodoc that's kind of rotten, and I'm not going to say anything about it until I do the podcast that will come out after this most recent podcast, which will be posted fairly recently. I would say in the next couple days. So yeah, this one talks about This is the portion that talks about Innerspace, which is just all kinds of awesome and cool. Yeah, this is the tank that they used for the show to simulate human fat cells. Here they show they're working on the pod. And how they did the baby, the sequence with the baby. Bunch of other just really really cool stuff. More shots of working on the pod and miniatures and stuff like that. If you are a fan of this film, like, I'd get your hands on this issue, or maybe have somebody scan it or something, or find a scan somewhere, because it is a absolutely great read and well worth it if you're a fan of Innerspace, and if you're a fan of Robocop. Sure, I mean, if you're a fan of films, period, like especially special effects, get some Cinefex. I mean, get your Cinefex fix. Then we have number 36 is another one that I got at the Goodwill, or my dad got me. This one I really wanted because this is the one that I really circled, because I flipped through it and then I realized, holy shit, it talks about the Blob remake. So this one though talks about a bunch of different ones. This talks about Alien Nation, Die Hard, Dead Ringers, and the Blob remake. So gives you some info on Alien Nation, which if you're a fan of that movie, I mean, that's some nice information on the effects that I'm not going to find on the DVD or the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray, I think, that got released by Umbrella, I think, or some other company. It's bare bones. There's some cool behind-the-scenes photos. This video might be a decently long one, so forgive me, but I just want to show you, give you a first-hand glimpse at my Cinefex collection, and just check out some cool set photos and behind-the-scenes stuff. Forgive me for the angles and everything. It's the best I could do with the setup that I have. This is a pretty cool shot. This is of they're working on Jeremy Irons for the scene in Dead Ringers, where they show you the conjoined twins, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, this is the one this is one of my favorite Cinefex articles, because it talks about the Blob remake from 1988. And it goes in really in depth on the makeup effects and on the visual effects and everything. The most in depth you'll ever see when it comes to the behind the scenes of this film, because the Blu-ray doesn't really go that in depth. I'd love for it to, but nope. I'm pretty sure Tony Gardner and company would talk about it. I guarantee they would. But the thing is, Scream Factory or the Shout Factory didn't get the rights. Twilight Time did, and they had a limited budget, so they didn't really put that much into it. But yeah, if you're a fan of the Blob remake, this is another magazine that you should definitely get your hands on. I mean, just for the really cool, I mean, the photos alone are really cool, but I mean, the information is just second to none when it comes to the making of the Blob remake. So that's a really cool issue. I mean, a lot of them are really cool. I mean, pretty much all of them are. I can't think of any Cinefex magazine that I own right now that isn't cool or worth my while. This is another one I got from Goodwill. This is issue number 40. And you can see why I got this one. It talks about Ghostbusters 2. And Ghostbusters 2 has no special edition. Doesn't have anything that goes in depth on the making of the movie. So this is the closest you can get to how they did all those awesome effects in the film. So if you're a fan of Ghostbusters 2, like this should be already in your collection or on its way, because especially if you're a fan of the effects and you want to know how they did it, because the Blu-ray and the DVDs don't give you shit, but Cinefex gives you everything. Gives you all the goods. Gives you all the ghost busting goods and shows you all the visual effects and practical effects, and it's a real tour de force. I mean, there's another Cinefex one. I don't have it. It talks about Ghostbusters. It's one of the earlier ones. It's pretty pricey. But eventually I will get that, because that's one of the 80s ones, and I want to get those all in my collection one day. I just think this is just so cool. I really do. Forgive the glare. I can't really do anything about it. Showing them working on the monsters and the puppets that they would end up showing in the film, and you get Vigo, and yeah, it's like 40 something pages. So here, working on the Statue of Liberty. And then more shots of the Statue of Liberty effects, which they really did a phenomenal job with, ILM and company. Showing more of the work that they worked on. And it's even more impressive when you learn that they had a really short budget. Not a short budget, I mean a really short amount of time to get all these effects done. So. And then there's a little part that talks about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which, to be honest, I mean, it's got some great effects in it and everything, but there's a lot of in-depth stuff on the making of Indy and the Last Crusade already out there on the DVD and Blu-ray, but there's still some fun stuff here, and it's still a fun read because there's still some stuff that's mentioned here that you don't see in the documentary or in the making of featurettes and stuff like that. Here they're working on the guy who decomposes, the guy who chose poorly. So yeah, that's issue number 40. Then we have issue number 41. This one talks about, you guessed it, Batman. This one also talks about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Huge fan of Batman '89, so this is really cool. The documentaries on the DVD and the Blu-ray are super in depth, but I mean, as a fan of the film, it's still a really cool thing to have because of set photos like this, like Anton First looking over a miniature of Gotham City, and just some nice cool photos and stuff like that. Working on Jack's makeup for the Joker. Showing the Batmobile. So cool. It really is. It's such a cool thing, that Batmobile. I love the Batmobile. It's so cool. For more of the miniatures, with designs by Anton First. Showing how they did the Batwing scene with the miniatures, and how they did the visual of the moon. I mean, the visual of the Batwing on the moon creating the bat signal. And then this other part talks about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which is really cool because Disney's gonna be a bunch of lazy dickwads and never even bother making a special edition of this movie. So, It's really cool to see how they did the effects, which is arguably one of the better films. I mean, the best that I've seen when it comes to miniaturization. So, I mean, it's really impressive. Too bad Disney doesn't give a shit. Because they didn't even release the Blu-rays for a wide release. They were released only on their Disney Movie Club site. So, I'm just showing how they did Auntie. They did stuff like the Scorpion and rear projection. I think it's rear projection. Maybe I could be wrong. It might be like blue screen or green screen or something like that. I think it was mostly blue. A lot of blue screening stuff. Green screening was fairly new back then. Yep, you can see the blue screen there. So there wasn't a lot of green screening. So yeah, Batman 89 and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. So that's issue number 41. We have issue number 44. This one talks about Dick Tracy, Ghost, and Always. Running some of the miniatures for Ghost. Pretty creepy image right there. The shadow things, like that's the stuff that really freaked me out. They talk about how they did those effects and everything. This shot of Patrick Swayze's character going into the light, which is a really, watching Ghost nowadays is a real tearjerker. It was a tearjerker before, but even more so nowadays that Patrick Swayze's no longer with us. And we have Dick Tracy, which I'm not a super big fan of, but it does have some really cool visuals, and so it is a lot of fun to, and it is very interesting to see how they did the visuals for how they did the effects for Dick Tracy. It was all the different makeup effects and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty cool. I like that shot of the makeup artist working on Big Head. Some just beautiful matte paintings in this movie, in Dick Tracy. Some absolutely gorgeous matte paintings. And then you have it talks about Always, a Steven Spielberg film that's been pretty much forgotten about. Pretty cool scene with a plane that's there to put out fires. So talk about how they did that. I think ILM worked on that. So that's issue number 44. Then we have issue number 45. Definitely had to get my hands on this because it talks about Robocop 2. Another film that doesn't have a special edition. I mean, it recently got one. So, thank God. But regardless, there are some interviews with some of the effects guys, but it still does not go as in depth as this issue does. So, as a fan of the film, I definitely wanted to get my hands on this. And I got my hands on this before the collector's edition even came out by Shout Factory. This one talks about Flight of the Intruder, Robocop 2, and Die Hard 2. There's some miniatures from Flight of the Intruder for fans of Flight of the Intruder, if there are any. Seems like a pretty not very well known movie. We got Robocop 2. This is a cool shot. I think that's Phil Tippett working on the Robocop 2 design. or it's technician. Yeah, technicians from Phil Tippett Studios. That's a really nice up close shot of that robot, the one that the failed Robocop 2 prototype. This is my face while watching the Robocop remake. Pretty much every Robocop fan's face watching that piece of shit. Here's a cool shot of Irvin Kershner with Phil Tippett. Badass shot of Robo in front of the OCP logo. And then Die Hard 2. I love that shot. I love that scene. It's just the right amount of over the top. Show how they did. They talk about how they did that sequence with the blue screen, and how they blew stuff up real good. So yeah, that's issue number 45. Then we have issue number 48, which is all about the Rocketeer and Backdraft. And I think there's another one. They also talk about a film that's not on DVD, which is actually a pretty fun movie, Cast a Deadly Spell, which is an HBO TV film. But this is loaded with goodness, because this talks about not only one but two of my favorite films, The Rocketeer and Backdraft. Now, Backdraft has a really great Blu-ray with a lot of really informative interviews with effects technicians and stuff like that, and behind-the-scenes footage. But there's still some nice information in this that you don't get from those interviews, because they're only there for a certain amount of time. So they don't go as in depth. But this is really cool if you're a fan of the film, because it tells you more about the fire effects and all the different visual effects and stuff like that they did for the film. Plus you have some really cool set photos. But this is the main attraction for me. The section about the Rocketeer. And I am a gigantic, enormous fan of this film, as you all know. And Disney has not done this film justice and given it the collector's edition or special edition that it deserves. So the closest I'll ever get to something like that is to read this article about the making of The Rocketeer. There is also a special that aired on Disney Channel in 1991 before the film came out, called Excitement in the Air, but it's not as detailed as this article is, which goes super in depth on the visual effects and the miniatures and everything in the film. Even talks about the animation that they did. So awesome. Shows them building the Zeppelin here. The Hollywood Land sequence with Sinclair. And then the last one in this issue is about Cast a Deadly Spell, which is really cool. A lot of cool makeup effects in this film, and they talk about a lot of the makeup effects. There's a cool shot right here with some gory aftermath and some cool little ghouls. The Cthulhu-like monster that was shown at the end of the movie. Really, this deserves a release. This should be on DVD or Blu-ray. Hopefully Blu-ray sometime. But yeah, this is issue number 48. And then we have issue number 51. This is when they started changing the way the magazine was printed. This one, and they changed a little bit of the format of the magazine. So this one talks a little bit about technology and magic, which I believe is just kind of something with James Cameron. A little info with James Cameron, and a profile of somebody named Catherine Kahn. A little quick article about Babe. And then the majority of this issue is about Batman Returns. Which I'm a huge fan of that as well. So this is really cool. This one I got a lot of these that I've been showing I got in a lot. So that's why off eBay. So honestly, is a great way to get these if you can get someone who doesn't really care about how much they're going to charge for the lot, because there are some people who charge like crazy prices for Cinefex lots on eBay, but there's other people who don't charge that much. So I mean, depends on the seller. Yeah, just talking about the various different effects that they did for Batman Returns. Very, very in depth on that. And then they talk about how they did a commercial, and then they talk about how they did the effects for that TV movie Intruders, which is kind of cool. I actually like that. I like the fact that they have these little elements like that. And then I think this is talking about Laserdisc. Yeah, this is talking about Laserdisc. So that's pretty fun. So that's issue number 51. Then we have issue number 52. I mean, number 53, which talks about Bram Stoker's Dracula. Another one of my favorites. I love that film. It also talks about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think. So this one is that talks a little bit in the beginning about A Muppet Christmas Carol. And then talks about how they did a commercial. And there's a little bit about Full Moon films. Full Moon Pictures. And then the rest of it's about Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is one of the most visually stunning films I've ever seen. I mean, just look at an image like that. It's just gorgeous. Such a absolutely beautiful, gorgeous film. I mean, the lighting and the way they set up the shots. I mean, there isn't another film like it. I mean, really. It's just such a beautiful film. Cinematography, editing, visual effects, just gorgeous. Sumptuous. Scrumptious. Just, delicious. Delicious film. This is an interesting shot. I don't remember this bottom shot being in the film. It's a drawing of some kind. Greg Kinnear and his makeup effects for the film, which I think he won an Oscar for, which he definitely deserved. And then this one is like goes back in the past and talks about Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is pretty cool. I mean, didn't talk about it before, so they talk about it later here and give you a little more info about it. This one talks about that. Oh, it talks about how they did the effects for that Orkin commercial with the Robo Orkin pest control guy. That's pretty cool. And then there's a profile on Doug Beswick. So yeah, they changed the format in the 90s, which is pretty cool. I mean, because you have little spots here and there. We can talk about other stuff. Talk about commercials and talk about how they did effects for a TV movie like Intruders. And then the rest, the final bits here, are... Earlier I was doing a lot of stuff that was in order, but that's kind of out of order now. Everything's out of order now because these are the last issues I'm showing, and these are the most recent ones I got. I got a lot off eBay, another eBay lot, really good price. So this is issue. These came in plastic sleeves, which I'd like to get them all in plastic sleeves, but I don't know where to get sleeves like this. So this is issue number 16, and this is a really cool one. This is a all Rick Baker issue, and talks about American Werewolf in London as well as a bunch of other ones. And I want to mention that because I actually saw American Werewolf in London in the theater recently. Actually saw it. By the time this video is posted, I saw it. I would say yesterday, yesterday night. But it was awesome to see that in the theater. So this is a really cool retrospective in a lot of ways of Rick Baker. Now this is from like 1984, I think. So I mean, it's not a. It doesn't talk about Harry and the Hendersons. It doesn't talk about anything like that. But it talks. But you know, you got stuff about It's Alive, and but it goes through a lot of his filmography. King Kong, where he played Kong. I don't know if you've heard this story before, but it's pretty crazy. Rick Baker was in the Kong suit for the 1976 King Kong film. And there was a scene that he did, and they were done shooting, and everyone went to go get lunch, but they left him in the Kong suit. And all they did is leave him a bunch of bananas to eat. But he couldn't eat the bananas because he couldn't get out of the suit. And there's no way to put the bananas down the mouthpiece or anything. So he was basically left there to starve by the asshole crew who just left him in the monkey suit. And that was not cool, but it makes for a crazy story. Another crazy thing about Kong, 1976, and Rick Baker, is that Rick Baker, when he was playing Kong, he had to wear these giant scleral lenses to create the look of ape-like eyes. Well, this posed a lot of problems. For one, not supposed to be wearing these scleral lenses for so long, and he wore them for hours, and you weren't supposed to wear them for that long. So when he would be driving home after shooting, he'd start to see halos everywhere, and his vision would start to blur, and he's still shocked that he even got home safely, because he was driving down the road at night, and there's all these halos in these halos in the sky, and he's disorientated. It was like he doesn't even know how he got home, but he managed to do that. I'm glad he did, because losing Rick would have been a huge blow to the effects industry. Yes, that's his work on Star Wars, because he actually did work on Star Wars. Incredible Melting Man. His effects in this are great. The film, not so much, but yeah. The effects definitely aren't a problem. There's Rick Baker working on the sculpt for the Funhouse. And this is Rick. This is a cool shot of Rick working on the prototype for a werewolf for The Howling. Because originally he was going to do the effects for The Howling, but then he got chewed out by John Landis over the phone and dropped The Howling and decided to do American Werewolf in London because he didn't want to hear John Landis chewing him out anymore. And it's a good thing he did, because he won the Oscar for Best Makeup Effects in 1982 for the 1981 film American Werewolf in London. And after seeing the film on the big screen, man, the effects still hold up amazing to this day. And American Werewolf in London features some of the best makeup effects you will ever see on any screen. And the effects were so good that the Academy created a makeup effects category, and Rick Baker won the first ever makeup effects award for American Werewolf in London. And he definitely did deserve it. Just a little bit of his work on Videodrome, because yes, he worked on Videodrome as well. And then some of his apes from Greystroke. The Legend of Tarzan. And Rick Baker really loved working with apes. He loved making ape effects. That's why he did a lot of ape effects in a lot of different movies. King Kong. I think he also did the ape effects for Incredible... I don't know if he did it for the Incredible Shrinking Woman. Greystoke. And Gorillas in the Mist. And he's actually said in interviews that Gorillas in the Mist is his personal favorite project that he's worked on, because he's really passionate about apes, and he worked really hard on it. And the gorilla suits that he created were so effective that even real gorillas couldn't tell the difference. So that was really cool. This is issue number 18, and this one talks about Temple of Doom and Star Trek 3. The Search for Spock. Kind of ran out of steam a little bit, so I'm trying to push this video along a little. So, bear with me here. Some of the miniatures and some of that goodness for Temple of Doom. The minecart sequence. A lot of miniatures were heavily used for that. I need to get around to reviewing these films someday, because they're a big part of my childhood, and I'm a huge fan of this trilogy. It's actually my favorite trilogy. My favorite trilogy of films is the Indiana Jones trilogy. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade. I saw all three of them in 35mm in the theater. I think yeah, it was last year. And it was awesome. And it was really, really cool. Talks about Star Trek 3. Search for Spock. So has some really cool effects. And the destruction of my favorite incarnation of the Enterprise. Favorite design of the Enterprise. The NC-1701A. It's underrated. I think Star Trek 3 is underrated. I don't think Star Trek 3 fits in that whole odd-numbered sequels suck category. Star Trek 3 Search for Spock is a legitimately good movie. And a good Star Trek film. So yeah, that's issue number 18. Then we have issue number 20, which talks about 2010. Talks about 2010, the year we made contact. The year we made contact. This is really cool. This whole issue is about 2010. So if you're a fan of that film, pick this up sometime, because it goes as in depth as anyone could possibly want or ask for when it comes to the making of this movie. I think it won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects. So, I think Richard Edlund and company did the effects for it. It still holds up great. Honestly, I like 2010 more than 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think it's underrated. It's overlooked. People don't really talk about 2010 that much. I understand. It's a sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, one of the most iconic and revolutionary science fiction films ever, but I don't know. I like 2010 more. I think it tells a story that's more engaging. The characters are stronger. It's got better pacing. And the effects are every bit as astonishing and mesmerizing. And it doesn't get enough credit for that. So, Yeah, 2010 a Space Odyssey, 2010 to the year remake Contact is right up there with some of the most underrated sequels ever made, if you ask me. And this is a really cool issue because it talks about the making of the film. And sadly, the movie doesn't have an in-depth documentary about the making of it. Just a featurette on the Blu-ray, which is lame. This won an Academy Award, or at least it was nominated. I know that for a fact. Then we have issue number 21, which talks about the Terminator and Dune, two of my favorite films from that year. Back when Terminator movies were actually fresh, because it was the first Terminator film, and things were actually different, and wasn't tired, wasn't an old hat like it is now. Don't give a shit about Terminator 6 or 7 or whatever the fuck it is and up to now. Don't care. Stop caring after T3. Yeah, this is really cool just to see the footage of the endo. I mean, the pictures of the endo. And the rest of it is all about Dune. David Lynch's Dune. And this is cool, but I already have The Making of Dune by Ed Naha, which is who actually worked for Cinefex. So it makes sense why he's so good with these making of books. And that goes even more in depth than this does, but it doesn't just only talk about the effects. So this goes a little more in depth about the effects portion of the film, and The Making of Dune talks a lot more in depth about the effects portion of the film as well as all the other aspects of the movie. Dune is another film, just like Bram Stoker's Dracula, that to me is one of the most visually stunning epics. And it's actually on a list of requests, so I cannot wait to actually talk about the movie and share my love of Dune, David Lynch's Dune, which I feel is extremely underrated. I don't think it's that bad. It's actually my favorite David Lynch movie. I know some people would really proclaim loudly that I'm wrong, but or how dare you, or what are you smoking? Really? That's your pick for best David Lynch movie? Yeah, it's my pick. Then we have issue number 22. Almost done here. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you've enjoyed this look at my Cinefex collection. This one talks about Return to Oz. Yeah, that creepy sequel to Wizard of Oz that a lot of people got nightmares from. Disney was really going out there with this. The wheelies. A lot of other crazy fucking shit. Like some headless creature. Probably triggered some people with the wheelies there. People who might remember. Who do remember about it. So the majority of this issue talks about Return to Oz. Then the other part talks about Baby. Secret of the Lost Legend, which I actually saw recently and was pleasantly surprised by. I thought it was a decent movie. I'll talk about more about it in an upcoming review. And I actually mentioned maybe a few bits of information I got from this Cinefex article. I thought the effects, to be perfectly honest, for the time were pretty impressive. I think they're overlooked. A lot of times nowadays people say they're cheap and they suck, but I don't think that's fair to the people who worked on the film. For 1984, which I believe is when this came out, they're really good. There's some really solid practical effects. Especially for everything they were tasked to do. There are some shots that really look great in the film. This is a precursor to Jurassic Park, folks, in terms of animatronics and mechanical special makeup effects. So if there are fans out there, baby Secret of the Lost Legend, this is a good issue to have. Because it tells you all about how they did it. How they did all those awesome dino effects. And yeah, some of the effects look cheap, but it's because of the lighting, and it's because of the fact that they did the best with what they could at the time. And then we have the last issue. Probably won't be the last issue of my collection. Maybe I'll do an update video in the future when I get more. But here we have the last one for this video. For this particular rendition of my collection. Number 23, which talks about Explorers. A film that is great for the first hour and then sucks when they get into space. So you have these fucking annoying aliens. Explorers is a prime example of a movie where the ending kills it. The ending fucking ruins the film. It makes the film below average. And I hate it. Or just average. And it could have been so much more than that. Explorers could have been up there with Goonies. Really. It was that good for the first hour. And then it goes off the rails in spectacular fashion. Which is really too bad. Trying to get this to show you that a little bit better. Yeah, when these fucking stupid cartoon character aliens show up. More about how they did the aliens. The effects are good. I'll give them that, but the fucking it's just a letdown, and the characters suck. I don't care about those fucking stupid aliens. Give a shit. Then talks about Life Force, which is really cool. Probably said cool like a billion times in this video, but really that's the best way to put it. Cinefex is cool. It really is. Cinefex is cool, man. And then it talks about My Science Project. I'm a fan of that film, so that's pretty cool to see how they did some of the effects, specifically some of the, the dino effects, which were really cool and really really well made for the time and for such a low budget. And then I talk about a few other things, but mostly focuses on the dino effects. So yeah, that's it. That's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's not for everybody. I know some people might consider it to be boring. But I just thought this is something I'm passionate about. I love behind the scenes stuff on films, and especially special effects, and Cinefex is a dream come true for me and for anyone else that is into that kind of thing. I'll have to say this. It is very detailed and very in-depth and uses a lot of terminology and a lot of things that effects guys would use. So it can be kind of dense at times, but it's still really entertaining and really fun to read, especially if you're interested in that, on how they did all those wonderful practical effects back in the 80s and 90s. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I can't recommend this. I cannot recommend Cinefex enough. I can't. I mean, this might as well be a video just being a paid promotion for Cinefex. I wish, but really, definitely check them out sometime if you can get your hands on any of them. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, I will see you later. See ya.